Here's a dozen or so simple, cheap tweaks that I make to practically every new bike I get, so hopefully some should strike a chord with you. All relevant product links in the description. Number 1, cable ties. Now, navigation has pretty much become a basic requirement for many riders, and mounting a phone or dedicated sat-nav somewhere convenient is one of the first mods many owners will make. I replaced the cheap plastic screen height adjuster on my 2024 Tiger with this more substantial metal accessory bar from AliExpress, which cost about €15. This way I can put my quad lock holder in my line of sight and at the same time free up the handlebars to make way for a tank bag. Thing is though, I'm not a fan of inductive charging and prefer to go with a good old-fashioned plug-in cable, but these can flap about in the wind and generally get in the way when not in use. So I order a cable of the right length to avoid any excess. This one is about 30 centimeters, and then use 3 cable ties. One to fix the socket cover down onto the cable to stop it flapping about in the wind, one to attach the charging cable to the accessory bar, and a third loosely pulled to the size of the plug and looped through the larger one to keep the phone plug securely in place when not in use. And I also keep a small selection of ties stored in a length of heat shrink tubing in my tank bag for emergencies when out on a ride. The product of 1,000 uses. More cable tie fun later. But now, how about a slidable tank bag? Now, many riders say that tank bags are ugly and make them feel hemmed in or restricted when riding, and I get that. However, unlike tail bags and panniers, tank bags do have the advantage of allowing you to access your stuff without getting off the bike. My go-to bag is this SW Motec Pro City, which offers enough room for things like water, snacks, charging cables, neck warmer, GoPro and mounts, spare batteries, sunglasses, first aid kits, reading glasses, earplugs and hand sanitizer. Problem on the Tiger is the position of the ignition, which makes accessing the key extremely awkward with a tank bag in place. So I improvised, and instead of adjusting their sliding magnetic base once and for all to the Tiger's tank, I tightened the screws only about halfway so that the bag could continue to slide when in situ. Once I'd got the right amount of resistance in the mechanism, I used some thread locker to stop the screws working loose and falling out. Access to the key is still a little awkward, but it's doable, and I can at least push the bag forwards away from me while riding and then pull it towards me when I stop and want to remove the key. Number 3, a rear splash guard. Now, every Tiger owner needs one of these because of the monoshock mounted just ahead of the rear wheel. Even Honda, well known for their penny pinching, fit one to their Transalp in the factory, but inexplicably, Triumph considers it unnecessary on their Tiger. A major oversight in my opinion, because this is what my swing arm brace looked like when a couple of weeks ago I brought my brand new Tiger back from the dealers just 15 kilometers away on perfectly warm, dry roads. Something had to be done. Fortunately, Pyramid Plastics in the UK make a simple to fit guard designed to remedy this, and it's available for a number of bikes including the Tiger 900. Installation is very simple, using either the plastic rivet supplied or, as I avoid drilling holes in my bike whenever possible, the double-sided sticky pads that also came in the kit. It is pretty obvious where and how to position the guard, but I'd recommend having a couple of practice presses first without the stickers on, then just peel and press. Pyramid recommends holding the guard in place for a minimum of 12 hours with some wood wedged against the tyre. Well, that may be possible, but it would almost certainly involve cutting a pretty accurately shaped piece of wood. So I used a microfiber cloth and my rain jacket pouch, and that seemed to do the trick. Anyway, here's the result after my first 10-kilometer test run, again on perfectly dry roads. The guard stayed on, which is always a positive, but more importantly, it prevented all this dirt from embedding itself in the rear shock. An absolute must then, if you have a bike like mine. Pyramid were also kind enough to send me this cash for the hole that Triumph leave in their rear mudguard stroke light unit, which has been designed to stop water being sprayed all over any luggage you may have back there. Nice, but this particular owner got creative and just cut some pipe insulation to length to plug the hole. I also received this infill for the left-hand side of the bike to protect the passenger's feet from getting a soaking if the roads are wet. The only problem I have with this part is the finish. It's a sort of smooth satin black, which doesn't really match the textured matte black of the surrounding factory plastic. So the two parts on the left are maybe optional, but the splash guard for the shock on the right is an absolute must in my opinion, and was one of the first tweaks I made to the bike. Anyway, thanks to Pyramid for sending me the parts, and for the 10% discount they're offering you with the code RocketMan10. And icing on the cake, I am not receiving commission on any sales. So in addition to saving a few euros, you've also got the added satisfaction of not lining a YouTuber's pockets. Number 4, crash protection. No such thing as 100% infallible crash protection in the event of a drop or crash. It's all about mitigation in my book, and I tend to go with lower crash bars to protect the expensive engine casings, combined with metal reinforced handguards from the likes of a Cerbis, or in this case Barkbuster, to at least stand a fighting chance. The Tiger comes with these plastic guards as standard, but they're only really for blocking the wind and will likely just snap if the bike goes down. I'm not a fan of upper crash bars because they add weight relatively high up where you don't want it, they can vibrate at higher speeds, and well, just don't look very nice in my opinion. As I explained in a video I did on this a year ago, the metal handguard plus lower crash bar combo works well enough for me. When used alongside lower crash bars, the handguards protrude sufficiently from the handlebars, even when they're on full lock, which they often are in a drop, to keep most of the bodywork off the ground. Now I know that most ground isn't perfectly flat, and that if you happen to drop the bike right over a pointy rock positioned perfectly under the front fairing, then you are going to sustain damage. But upper bars don't provide guaranteed protection either, so I'm prepared to take the risk in the name of aesthetics and weight saving. To protect the rear, and in the case of the Tiger also the exhaust, I keep the Pro carriers for my SW Motec cases on all the time. I know they're not crash bars and are not designed to withstand heavy impacts, but they're better than nothing, and they also allow me to carry this SW Motec Trax toolbox in which I keep tools and a puncture repair kit. It attaches discreetly to the inside of the carriers, so there's no extra width at the rear of the bike, unlike the Dusk carriers that I use for touring. Top boxes are very popular and, I'll admit, exceedingly practical, but personally I just can't. I'd rather carry my helmet around with me than have a top box ruining the looks of my bike. So I use this more low profile soft Ion S tail bag, again from SW Motec. To avoid having to buy an expensive bike specific rack every time, I use a small nylon chopping board which can be cut to size and or shape if necessary. I drill a couple of holes through it and the bag, yes, probably voiding the waterproof part of the warranty, but I'm not bothered about that. I source some longer M8 bolts and screw it onto the rack. Job done. Number 6, paint protection. Now the Triumph Owner's Manual would have us believe that, and I quote, matte paintwork requires no greater care than that already recommended for gloss paintwork. I'm not sure about that. In my experience, it's easy to unintentionally polish parts of the tank, for example, with bags, knees or stomachs, and even gloss paint is prone to micro scratches as soon as you start touching it. So I do my best to protect the paintwork preemptively and find that these products work the best for me. From left to right, Fast Glass from Autoglym, which counterintuitively is fantastic for cleaning matte paint. I've written matte paint cleaner on my bottle to remind me that this is for that purpose, because you really wouldn't think that a glass cleaner was any good for matte paint, but it is. Once the paint's clean, I finish it off with some matte finish detailer from Muc-Off. Leaves no streaks or residue, and the paint does seem to stay nice and matte. Vinyl and rubber spray from Autoglym once every couple of months keeps the seat nice and supple in the Portuguese sun, and I use their rapid ceramic spray to keep the gloss areas of the bodywork clean and shiny. It's not a graphene wrap and it won't fend off rocks or bullets, but it does seem to be effective against micro scratches. Just remember, never use traditional wax or polish on matte paint. On key friction areas, I use these two essentials in any garage, in my opinion. First is a roll of transparent Scotchgard from 3M. It's quite expensive, but it lasts for years because you only need a little bit for each bike. On the Tiger, I cut out this small rectangular piece for the tank where my bag rests on the paintwork. Okay, some matte film would have looked nicer, but I don't have any, and it's hidden under the bag anyway for most of the time. It looks more discreet than commercially available tank protectors, and of course, once you've invested in the roll of the film, each part that you cut out costs only pennies. The second must-have for paint protection is a roll of cloth tape. I use this to protect less visible parts, especially when I'm bolting things onto the frame or the handlebars. The Barkbuster handguards, for example, have big bitey clamps which would chew up the powder coating on the bars in seconds. So a quick ring of cloth tape to the rescue. It not only protects the bars but also gives the clamp something to get its teeth into. I also ran a strip along the underside of my tank bag where it rubs against the Scotchgard film just to add some extra cushioning. Number 8. Puppies and Angels. Another two vital mods in my opinion. Grip puppies that I put on all my bikes and scooters increase the girth of the grips for my large hands, make the grips nicer to squeeze in a BMW M steering wheel kind of way, and also help attenuate vibration. I would advise, however, that you pony up for the real deal though. They're expensive for what's basically 2 bits of foam rubber tubing, but they do last well, unlike AliExpress knockoffs, which I have tried and which disintegrate after a few months, especially if you get them wet. I also stick some protective film on the TFT clock. Now, bike screens are generally not touch sensitive, so I don't deliberately put my fingers directly on them, but they do attract dust and are therefore easy to scratch and expensive to replace. So a 10–15 euro kit from Speedo Angels will save potential heartache. Now, people complain that they don't stick or they're impossible to install without getting air bubbles underneath, but I've found that if you take your time and actually read and follow the instructions, something admittedly no man likes to do, then the end result is spot on. I have of course tried cutting out a piece of 3M Scotchgard, but it's thicker and therefore more difficult to apply successfully, so I don't mind paying for the Speedo Angels kit. Number 9. More cable tie fun. We all know how important it is to keep your battery well charged. Most owners go for either Optimate or C-Tech in Europe. I went for the latter many years ago and to be honest can't really recall why. Probably because they have more LEDs on them than the Optimates, and the more flashing lights the better, right? Anyway, in standard format they're a bit slippery and a bit awkward to place on the bike or car, and I prefer not having them on the floor just in case my garage gets flooded. So in conjunction with the optional silicone rubber protector, I make a loop out of a small and then a large cable tie, and bingo, I can hang them on the foot peg, rider or pillion, and they're out of harm's way. And finally, stealing stuff meant for cyclists. Most motorcycle gear is very expensive, but regular sports shops like Decathlon sell some really good stuff for cyclists, and prices are much lower. In addition to their cycling shirts, which incidentally make great base layers at prices that motorcyclists can only dream of, they also make a dozen or more small, more or less waterproof bags. Now, most of them are designed to be strapped onto a bicycle frame, of course, but sometimes you get lucky and find one that's just right for your bike. A case in point, this 4 or 5 euro mini zip-up bag designed to fit under a bicycle saddle. It can be wedged in between the dash and the side wind deflector of my Tiger, and is perfect for holding a microfiber cloth for wiping down visors and windscreens, as well as the badge for Portuguese toll motorways. Have a look at what they've got and you'll almost certainly find something that fits your bike. Anyway, I think most of the tweaks and ideas I've shown you can be used as is or modified to suit your needs. So let me know in the comments if you've collected any more similar ideas. And as always, thanks for watching.